Thank you all for joining us here tonight. I'm Renee Barrio, Chief Curator here at the McNay, and it's a pleasure to welcome Ashley here to join us for Artists Looking at Art. For those of you who are not familiar with our series, each year, over the course of the year, the McNay invites 3 or 4 artists from our community to present work in the gallery and also to have a conversation about their work so we can learn more about artists who are living among us. Ashley's presenting 3 beautiful paintings right outside the door. I think most of you have seen them right near the elevator. And so we're just going to have a very casual conversation to explore her biography, her background, but also her work and her interests, and talk about all kinds of things, whatever she wants to talk about, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end. So again, thank you all for joining us. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I'm really honored to be a part of this program. I think it's really important for San Antonio to recognize San Antonio artists. It's an honor to be in the same vicinity as the amazing collections that the McNay has to offer, and to be surrounded by some really amazing supporters in the audience right now, and to talk about my process, specifically the work that, the ideas that led up to what you see outside in the lecture hall.
So why don't we start by just exploring your background a little, where you're from, where you went to school, just how you got here tonight.
Well, I drove here. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I'm San Antonio, born and raised. I've been doing artwork since I was 15 years old, and I discovered art at an early age. I was introduced to a program called SAYC, which is a creative youth development program for talented high school and middle school students from all over the city.
How did you find out about that?
Well, my art teacher told me about it, Miss Donna Simon.
Well, I think she's here with us tonight.
I was just, she saw me sketching in my freshman year in her Art 1 course or something.
What school was that?
Brackenridge High School, yes. And she suggested that I apply for this program called SAYC. And then I applied in the January of 1999, and that really changed my life, essentially forever. Because the thing that sets SAYC apart is that they recognize and amplify student voice, and then in addition to learning to paint, things like that, which is something that I would have learned in any art classroom that's available in San Antonio, but just understanding that it's your passion, and your passion is right, and you can pursue it, and you can pursue it in a way that makes money for you, or at least makes you happy, and you can pursue it on a long-term basis.
And when you were growing up, you were making art, doing art things, right? Did you think about being an artist as a career, or that could be your way of life?
Well, I mean, during high school, it was hard to say. I was kind of just in it, but I was exposed to pathways that encouraged higher education there at SAYC. So in addition to getting some help going to a pre-college program at RISD, and then having everyone else around me also interested in pre-college programs, so peers my own age were interested in making more of their life and pursuing the arts as part of their core passion. And so just seeing that around me modeled made it a real path. Whereas probably in my neighborhood, yeah, I definitely would not be sitting in front of you right now. I can guarantee it.
So then, after SAYC,
I just didn't leave.
You didn't leave. So you're still there?
I'm actually coming from there right now.
Okay.
So I'm their visual arts director. And so what's really cool about that is that I have an alumni experience that I can share with my students. I've been working there well, I started there as an intern because you needed as an end cap, and I was like, hey, SAYC, can I get an internship? And they're like, all right, cool. And then I just never left. And so that was back in 2009 or 2010, and then I just stayed. I took over. And then I was just, in addition to being around a creative challenging work environment. I get to work with kids who are just wackiest, interesting, thought-provoking, like people that you'll ever meet. And that's every day. And then I get paid to do that, which is really, really cool.
So here's some examples of your work.
Yeah, so this is some of my work, and so I'll just set the tone in case you don't know me. I like birds. I have one here, and I have some there. And so my work always tends to, even from high school, I mean, when I was in high school, I was using animals to convey messages that were interesting to me, exciting to me in some way, ideas that were things that were bothering me, and so I took attributes from different animals, and then for the last, I don't know, 7 years, it's been birds. And so you'll see kind of on the left side, your left side, hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are a reference to working really hard. They're a very small bird, if you don't know. And they work really hard, and they can really go unnoticed. And I feel like all of us can relate to working really hard and maybe going unnoticed. So what I've done in this work is I've kind of made them bigger, and I've slowed them down. And so as a call to myself in many ways to like recognize my own, recognize my own hard work for myself, and then also to slow down a little bit. I think that that's good advice for everybody.
So before you sort of focused on birds, you did other animals as well?
Yeah, so it used to be elephants.
Elephants.
And so elephants have this really interesting quality. They have this great memory, has been documented by scientists, and they have a memory, and they have, so one thing that really spoke to me for elephants, African elephants in particular, because of the texture, and I love the size of their ears. In all of my work, texture is really important. Elephants have this memory of, and they have this way of grieving, and so they'll go back for years to a site where an animal has died, and then they have a gentleness to them where they won't actually stand on anything that their weight can't physically carry. And so for me, that sense of self was, to me, human, and something I wanted to imbue in myself, sort of an elegance or an understanding of your own personal space. And that was, and I used that quite a bit to tell stories about my own family history. And I continue to talk about my own family history even today through animals and through nature. And in this particular work, I think this is around 2016 is where I start to isolate the feathers from the birds. I'm talking specifically here about, for lack of a better word, maybe an identity crisis, and I'm sure we all have one at one time or another. And it's about a connection or a disconnection to a particular culture that you may feel like you should have, but you don't. And so for me, I was raised by, my mother was white, and then, so she didn't look like me at all, like at all. And then later my stepdad was black, and I was raised in a predominantly black neighborhood. And I would go to say C, and it would be a lot of brown faces, but I just wasn't sure where I kind of fit in like the category situation. And also, language is so important to a culture, and I don't speak Spanish, and so I felt like there was a lack of membership in a lot of ways. I still do, and I vacillate back and forth, but what's great is I can have like a conversation about maybe feeling disconnected and feeling connected. This piece is actually an amalgamation of a variety of different bird feathers that I've kind of like stuff together to make it work, because that's what we all are. We're just like a bunch of different things put together, and we're just trying to like fly in some way. So that's kind of this painting is, I really like that one a lot.
And when you're painting these feathers, are you painting from real feathers, or you're painting from imagination, or? It
depends, because sometimes I get really caught up on trying to be like accurate. Which is fun, but also not very fun. And then
kind of tedious.
Yeah, and so I'm like, also, you question painting. It's like, why am I trying to be this accurate when a photo can do this? So what, if I'm using the medium of painting, then make it a painting.
Right.
So not, but then I'm also like, ooh, challenge yourself. So it just, depends on the day.
Right.
So sometimes I'll just look at it and then and I'll close the book, or I won't look at it at all, because there'll be a certain point where I'm like, because I don't have like a really good memory, and so I do want a semblance of what it's supposed to look like, and I do want to push myself as an artist to create things that I see in my head. So it's a back and forth process. This work is like a hug for myself.
A hug?
It's like a hug. And so it's kind of in reference to the piece prior to it, where you...
This came after the other work?
So it's in the same like 3 months
Right.
span, so they're siblings, I guess. And so this one is a really fun piece because it zooms in on a particular space, and it just seems like almost like a landscape, and switchbacks going back and forth like a mountain range. So again, it's reference to place and community, but just not knowing exactly where, but also making it okay, like, because it's in like this hug frame to it as well. So I had, and then the warm quality of the colors there were really helpful to illustrate the idea I had there. And
the things that kind of motivate these paintings that you're describing, how is it important to you that your viewer know these things, or is that just your process to get to this painting?
I really am very secretive. I'm not secretive, I just am very private, I would say. And I am very open to interpretation from other people. So for example, I had this painting like right after I graduated from UTSA, where it was a still life of a bunch of dirty dishes. And for me, I don't like dishes. And I don't know who the heck would like dishes, but the person who bought it loves to do the dishes. And so she considered it baptismal.
Interesting.
And I'm like, cool.
Right.
And so I'm just like, to each his own, and I'm like, it's kind of like what I tell my students. I'm like, you birthed this baby, and now it's doing other things.
Right.
You know, you're not in charge of it anymore.
Right.
And so I'm totally cool with that. And then this piece has an interesting story to it, and I'll preface it. I make jokes, but a lot of my work is pretty serious. But my mother died in 2015, and this is the work from like 2016. So the first paintings I was able to create after her death. And it's based on a series of photographs that my husband took. There was this bird, this dove that lost his or her life in like running into our back door, the window. And him knowing me and being a romantic guy, he put on some gloves and took some pictures and was like, hey, you want these pictures? You can use these for your art. And I was like, heck yeah, I can use these. And that's just the kind of relationship that we have. And so I turned these into a bunch of different collages, and I had quite a bit of fun with them. This piece in particular is in reference to an unexpected thing that happens sometimes when people die. You learn some things you didn't want to learn. You wish that you just have questions, but now there's nobody to answer them. So and again, this is interesting that you say it. So the viewer might not realize this because the background and the foreground mix together in a lot of ways. But what you're seeing here is the back of a bird's wing, like the shoulder, and then the head just out of frame. And so you're looking over it, and what this bird is doing, whether you know it or not, he's eavesdropping on your conversation. And he's trying to learn a little something without you knowing. And so it's based on that, the saying like, well, a little bird told me.
Right.
And you'll notice that it's very red, lots of red here. And it is red, red is very significant in the next few pieces because of another saying. And I don't know where because you hear and you pick up these sayings and you don't know where, but, and I don't know if other people have heard this, but if you see a red bird, you'll have good luck. Is that a thing? Maybe, I don't know. But essentially, like, it's true for me, and it's true, it's like fact. And so I made this bird red because you can't wait around for luck to happen. You make your own. And then this piece is a story I made up based on so it has like a crucifixion type look to him.
Mm-hmm.
This bird died for our sins, and so that we could live a better life. And I know I'm not religious at all, but
Were you raised in religion?
Church of Christ, and I was baptized and all that stuff. But it's art history that I learned a lot of the motifs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just use that language and adapt it for my own personal needs. And so I wanted to crop out the face. And I don't typically like to paint bird feet, and you'll notice that in future works. I just think they're really ugly. But in some cases, especially for painting, and especially for painting birds, like people know that, I don't know. But like, sometimes they need to be ugly. Birds are just so beautiful. Sometimes you just need things to be ugly. And this painting needed a bit of.
You made them beautiful.
Yeah, oops. Oops. But to me, they're still really, it's important to me that there's this backstory, because I know that, I'm talking about my mom's death, and I'm trying to make it okay again, that like a reason for why she died.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm putting a lot of that into this bird. And but I think that a lot of people can see a lot of different things. Like I've heard various interpretations of this work, and I'm like, yes, you're correct every time. This one's really fun. It was kind of the last piece in the series, and at this point, I'm dreaming in red. I had treated myself to a bunch of different brands of red paint, and I've been reading books about, what is it? It was called The History of Red. It has a lot to do with Cortez and his influence on the Americas. But a lot of red, and this one was kind of like a flag, like a triumph, a finish of this particular set of works. And in making the collage for this piece that ended up becoming the painting, it made a whole lot of sense. And then, like you were saying before about looking at something and painting it like source images versus just painting. So the brushstrokes in this particular piece were really exciting to me, and I had a lot of fun.
So these are kind of based in photographs, right? You mentioned a collage.
A collage of photographs.
And then you paint from that.
Mm-hmm. So I just kind of manipulate it physically, and then it's a weird process, because it almost feels like printmaking, where it's the process goes through a ringer before you can see the end result. So that I've almost made it completely unhinged from what it was originally. And I think the further it goes from the beginning is a success in a lot of ways, because maybe it means growth. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And your studio's in your home?
Yeah. So we converted our garage. So that was a really special moment, because I was working in a side room or something. And it's funny, because when I was in high school, I took over the kitchen table. Because no one sits together at the table anymore. And so I was like, I'll take it over. And then I put myself in this little side room in the house, and then I have this bigger garage, longer style room, and now I need more room. Mm-hmm. And so it's just kind of, I could probably fill up this space. Man, that would be cool, really cool. Okay, good. I was like, that's a little white. This one is a lure. I don't know if anybody goes fishing here. And I'm trying to dissect what I'm truly trying to get at with these birds. I'm trying to take it, pick it apart, and figure out what is the crucial element I'm trying to get here. And so I was looking at some lures, some fishing lures, and they're fly fishing lures. And if you don't know what a fly fishing lure is, it's a little fishing hook, and it's wrapped in a variety of feathers from exotic, beautiful birds, and then it's supposed to look like a bug. And so what's really beautiful to me about that is that it's materials from one animal to look like another animal, to trick another animal. So I'm just like, that's ridiculous. That's amazing. I love that. And so in the process of talking about deception and talking about trust, the lore made perfect sense. And for this particular piece, I wanted it to be white, because unfortunately, you know, we learn a lot from our parents, but my mom's particular taught me about this one, I don't know what you call it, but it's called a little white lie. And it's okay, because it saves face for somebody else. And it's not something I practice, but we all do it in some ways, and it's just a really interesting thing, and I don't feel like, so this is a little bit about her and that saying, but it's also a little bit about maybe how sometimes you approach people, like maybe you think they're putting up these feathers when really there's a hook. And so you're just kind of guarding yourself, and the prettier it is and the more attractive it is, it's probably even worse, which is a terrible thing to think. It's being that guarded, it takes a lot of work. But it's not a very aggressive painting, and I've seen, when this work was in galleries, people get really close to it, and I was like, oh, gotcha.
No, you're luring them in, right?
Yeah, a lure, get it? Yeah, it's like, I got them.
Right. So do you ever incorporate the human figure in your work?
I've done, I have before, I can't really connect with humans too much. I mean, I connect with like, you know, it's a really interesting thing that you say that, but I did have a series of work that had a lot of like hands in it, and I have tried it. It just doesn't feel right. It's like putting on an outfit that's just not quite you. But it's like, well, at least I tried it. You don't want to be that person who like, nah, you know. I could come back to it because I'm talking about human nature. I'm talking about all of that.
Right.
But maybe that's why I don't do it. Maybe I'm doing it because that would be too obvious or something. And I am trying to be mysterious, you know, not like that.
But you're also a young artist, so you'll find your way maybe to the figure, maybe not.
Who knows? So this is not my painting. This is not my photograph. I pulled this from Pinterest. So, and it's got if you want to learn more about it, there's a website there. So I put this one in there because it leads into the work that you see outside of the lecture hall. I don't, so in like last year, essentially, like some things came to a head in my personal, professional, and artistic life, and it wasn't good. And I had a practice of kind of evaluating moments in my life, and then so in those moments, I found myself being really upset by these plants. Like I
By the
hate
plants?
Yeah, they're ugly. I hate them.
Okay.
I don't hate them. I don't hate.
Did you have them at your home?
No, they're not allowed.
No.
But the thing is, like, I always thought that I didn't like them because I didn't think that they were attractive. Like I didn't think they were aesthetic or whatever. But it turns out, twist, that I was actually doing some association with them, and I was associating them with the neighborhood I grew up in. And so I grew up in a neighborhood that was not great. So I'll preface this by saying I had a really great childhood. And so Huckleberry Finn style adventures, all of that good stuff. But I don't think that people would choose to be raised in that particular situation, surrounded by poverty and gangs and drugs, domestic violence, mental health issues, sexual assault. I just don't think that So I was associating the two, and those were around my neighborhood because they were very resilient plants.
Right.
They grow everywhere very easily in all temperatures almost. You can't break them. They require no maintenance, and they have a pop of color, so they're everywhere. And I'm sorry I've ruined this plant for anybody, but it's just my own personal take on it. And so I had to assess myself, because I'm like, you can't roll your eyes at a plant and like suck your teeth at a plant. You have to like deal with your stuff, right? And so here's me dealing with my stuff.
So we'll see. Oh,
And so enter the Forgiveness Project, summer of 2018. And here I interview people about how they feel about forgiveness. And pictured here is very choppy notes based on those conversations. And they really are more interviews because I just wanted to listen. I didn't want to add my 2 cents. And so I wanted to ask people how they felt about forgiveness, how it felt for them to forgive, how it felt to be forgiven, and discussing grudges and things like that. And I've interviewed people from people I know very well and to people I barely know. And it's mostly women, but I didn't do that on purpose. It just so happens. And so
and when you interview them, do you record them or just take notes?
I take notes, and so far I haven't ever done this before. Like I usually don't. I cloister myself in my studio, and I'm like, me, the artist, my feels. And so, and for this time, I was like, you know what? Let's try this. And so this is a pivot in my work. I feel.
And it's ongoing.
And it's ongoing. It's really only like
So
the beginning.
do you know yet how that's going to be an artwork?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure and do that because out of respect for the artist, it's like, oh, I'm going to make what I'm going to make despite whatever you say, which I thought would be really disrespectful. And so figuring out how to incorporate this litany of ideas into my paintings and funnel them in a way that is still me, was difficult, but ultimately like refreshing, so I really enjoyed that. And so before I talk too much about like the paintings that you see in the hallway there, I wanted to make sure and talk a little bit about my source images. John James Audubon I used a lot of his work as references for my paintings. He is an 18th century naturalist and ornithologist painter. He's also the namesake for the Audubon Conservation Society, one of the largest prolific bird conservation societies in all of the Americas. The thing about him is that he cared nothing about the conservation of birds. At that time, no one cared about conservation at all, so just putting it into perspective. There were a lot of artists at the time who were painting birds and sending them to Europe, like, oh, look at what this cool stuff happening in the Americas, and people were like, that's cool. But the thing that set him apart is he'd kill these birds, wire them up, and then like pose them back in their habitat. And so you had these very naturalistic paintings of birds in their natural habitat. And so I have this book, and it was a gift from my husband, and it's my favorite object in the world, and currently, until I get a new object. And for my paintings, I had some prefaces. I knew I had to deal with my family in this particular set of work. And so I open up to the series about ducks. And ducks are important to this work because at my mom's wake, people would give these eulogies and talk at length about how she liked to feed the ducks at the pond. And so person after person realized that this was a very special part of her day. And she was a bit of a shut-in, and so this was her connection to the outside world. That was not just like getting groceries, things like that. And for me, I took this as a sign of like, hey, you like to feed ducks, I like to paint birds, we're connected forever.
Nice.
And so I'm just like, cool, let's do this. And so when I look through the book, ducks are in a section organized by like habitat or something called waterfowl. And I was like, score, wordplay. I love wordplay. And if you don't know me, I love wordplay. And so water being an essential element was, and something that's just beautiful and life-giving, paired with a homonym like foul, distasteful, disgusting, like sort of a no, and pairing them together just kind of was a sign to me, and so I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And so Junction is, I think it's a portrait of my mother, and it is a duck in there, and surrounded by the purple heart plant. And I don't know if I mentioned the name of the plant, but it's called the purple heart plant. It's called many names, and you're all right. You're all correct. And then the purple heart plant plays like a lot of different positions in my work. And so it represents both the trauma that I hold, but also the forgiveness of that trauma. So it's like in the same breath, it's all of those things. And so in this work, I think about my interviews, and the thing that was really interesting to me is how well adjusted these people are. And so, you know, to acknowledge forgiveness as like not something that you give. Like you can give it, and I could be like, I forgive you. But you don't necessarily have to be there to receive it. There's no receiving necessary. You can still give it without anyone on the other end. And a lot of times it's about, they would say it's like about forgiving yourself first. And so in this piece, there's an acknowledgement of that. And I would say it's aggressive only because there's way more plants than there is duck.
Right.
Also, I've removed the legs so that you can't run away. Also, you know, I don't like painting the feet, so I already gave it away. But he's not like with his wings, like trying to get away, but just kind of accepting it, like passively, I would say. And it's kind of covering up the face and kind of tapping you on the shoulder, like, hey, there's this thing you need to do, and then. So when I was thinking about this work and what I would say, I noticed that I was focusing mainly on the things that it wasn't doing in order to interpret. So it's not running away.
Right. Has no feet.
There's no feet. And then also these plants bloom these beautiful pink buds, and they're brighter or more subtle, just depending on the day. And then for me, the blooms are representative of like being like, yes, forgiveness. And so there are some blooms there, but they're pretty pathetic. And I did that on purpose. And so it's it is the beginning of this project. So I thought that would make sense. I'm not going to pretend you go through all of this and like 6 months later you're like good. So just being, you know, realistic about it.
And what about the title?
Junction, yeah. So Junction is the name of, it's Junction Highway, which is a street as well in Kerrville. And I learned right outside that it also leads to Junction, the town. And then Junction was the name of the last place my mom lived.
Oh, okay. A very specific reference.
Very specific. But I think that it has a dual meaning, because Junction, like you have these crossroads type of thing, so it made a lot of sense. In this piece, I wanted to consider the idea of the unforgivable, and according to 99.9% of the interviews I conducted, that's not a thing. There's always...
Oh, what's the way to forgive?
There's some redeeming quality. There was conversations about deaths during drunk driving and other horrible events that people were like the act of forgiving that person or that incident put them at ease in a way that holding on to it just never could. In this piece, I'm acknowledging that by switching gears, and this is a different bird. This is a passenger pigeon. This bird went extinct in the 1900s due to mass human hunting and disruption of their nesting grounds. These birds used to be so numerous they would block out the sky and take hours to pass overhead. And so it just seemed like if there was a bird to go extinct, it would not be this one. Right. And so my consideration here is that, you know, you have these passes maybe that you give somebody over and over, and then but there's always a limit. And so here I placed this passenger pigeon in a very vulnerable spot. And so essentially it's going heart first into a pile of purple heart plants, but the purple heart plants are actually hiding a snake. Dun, dun, dun.
Which is kind of hard to see, but at the bottom, right?
Yeah, so that's the role of the purple heart plant. However, the snake is not like mouth open. So again, it's like what it's not doing. And so the snake is just like there. But there's always, and again, I'm pulling from like, you know, Christian like ideas of the demonization of the snake. Poor snake gets the bad end of the deal, like, oh gosh. But in this case, it's the language I'm using to talk about the potential of future harm, future trauma, right? And so the purple heart plant in this mode is hiding it, but it's also a medicinal quality because it allows you to be vulnerable and it allows you to be heart first. And so it's kind of like the risk you take in order to live a life that's worth living, right? So it's like that. South Cross is a family portrait, obviously, right? So it's 4 birds, my brother, my sister, my mom, and myself. And we are applied collage style to a lure that is red in the background. And
I can see the hook coming off the top.
Yeah, you got it there. Yeah. And it is, so we're an amalgamation of feathers along this lure. And so we are both headless and feetless and not acknowledging each other or changing direction because of each other. But we are physically touching or connected physically, but not, you know, nothing changes about the way that we are. And so along the spine of where along the spine of the hook would be is actually a purple heart plant. Oh, yeah. Right. And what it's doing is it's casting a shadow onto us. And it's essentially talking about, it's again like, let's acknowledge the first step here. Let's understand that there's something that needs to be acknowledged between us. Or understanding that, like, what was it? Like, there was this one interview that was talking about being okay with understanding, like, this is not the whole person. This is just a part of the person. Right. And, like, letting that control, losing the control of, like, making them be something that they're not. And so that's kind of part of what was inspirational for this particular piece.
And you just finished these 3 pieces for...
Yeah, I did. It was, I just finished them.
And were they kind of conceived at the same time? We were thinking about all the 3 compositions?
I think I was working at 2 at one time. It just really, because I wasn't sure what to do with some of these interviews, and I was like wondering like how to squeeze out a picture from them in some ways. Because in a way, I was like, oh, well, I'll pick like an excerpt of like a really great quote and I'll turn that into something. But it's really like, it's a casserole of ideas, I think. But I love the style of the interviews just being about their feelings. And the thing that I remember most was someone's interview where they were talking about how your family teaches, you're taught how to forgive. Like, you're taught it through your family. Like, when something happens, like, a transgression, like
Right.
how is that handled? And then that's how you live your whole life. Or then at some point you're like, hey, I realized that probably wasn't great. I'll do something different now. And so that was kind of like understanding that, like, yeah, it's something you learn.
Right.
Was really special too. And so, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, and I think we have a few minutes for some questions, so we'll see if
Yeah,
anyone
I'm open
in the audience
to
has a question.
all the questions. Oh my God. It's my students. Yes.
I've known Ashley since she was 15, when she first started to say, I first started to say since she was there. I was a visual arts director. We connected, I think, right away. We were really close. And I'm just so amazed. I just had such a connection with everything you said tonight. I love birds as well, and I collect birds, and I draw birds, and do a lot of birds in my life. But Ashley just always impressed me how determined she was. She lived a long way from Stacy. When I met her, I think you were going to East Central High School, right? So the bus would take her to your home in Southcroft, and then she would take another bus to get to Stacy. Stay there till, 8 o'clock at night, and go home on the bus. And she dressed like a boy, so she wouldn't bother her. But I just want to say how proud I am. So amazing.
Thank you. Love you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
When you do your interviews, is it one-on-one, or are there other people around? Do you do it in a public location? How's that happen?
Well, I wanted it to be very official, because I didn't, and to me, I feel like I make a lot of assumptions with this, internally, I didn't say it, but I made a lot of assumptions with this project, and those were all kind of blasted away, but I never articulated them to anybody, but I just assumed that people would be more honest if it was just me and them, because no one wants to say, like in a group, like, well, maybe they do. See, I don't even know. So like that, to like, because you feel like, oh, well, I'm being interviewed, so this is me now. But in all honesty, you can feel one way today about forgiveness and then another way tomorrow. And so for me, I just imagined what I would want. Like, so yes, it was one-on-one. I made sure to schedule their time, because I just feel like, and understanding that, like, I didn't want it to digress too much. It wasn't like, tell me the story of your life, and tell me about that guy who cheated on you and how you feel. Like, I didn't want to get all up in their business, so I like kept it to like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it was very vague and just general about like that sort of thing. And I wanted to value their time in that way, and have my notebook ready. So one time, like, somebody became available, but I didn't have my notebook, and I was like, but it has to be that notebook. And so I rescheduled, because I guess that's what you do. And so, and what I ended up doing with that, so that project lasted like 4 sketchbooks. And so what I ended up doing is, like, I bound another sketchbook and then cut those pages out and like collage them in there, because I was like, well, I'll just, and so some of them have like really great sketches, well, not great, but sketches on the other side that I'm like, damn it, I wish I could have stayed with that one. And so it's, because I just felt like I'll just be really organized and I'll keep it together, and it'll give me an excuse to do bookmaking again, which then I got into, and then all my friends got books for Christmas, and so it was just really nice. Yes, sir.
So, did you sketch while you interviewed the people?
I would just take notes on what they were saying. Like I said, I have a bad memory, and I wanted to make sure I was capturing what they were saying accurately. Yeah.
A little bit of a follow-up question. Your process, so you had an idea for this forgiveness project.
Yes.
But you didn't know how it was going to end up.
Correct.
And you still don't, right?
Oh, no. I mean, and that's kind of a little exciting for me. I think that in the past, like you have this, I don't know if like if you paint, you make art in here, you just like, the work is already finished in your head, and all you have to do is make it look like that. And so this unknown qualities is kind of scary, but there's no one like, well, except for this deadline, oops. There's no deadline, so it's just about like, healing. And so I'm like, ooh, how freeing is this? That's really fun. So there's no like, but I have like I have a language to talk about what I want to make. So like for example, red, for example, big means something, pencil means something else, and so forth. So it's just, you know, like using my library of what I've created.
And that library came from the lessons of craft that you learned through, say, C and other ways, is that correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would say like, say C. Yeah, just kind of one of those things to, so I remember I made this painting in high school, and it was all about all the things that I don't know about. And that was the painting, that was what the painting was about. And so for me, I put in like all this different stuff in there that was about painting that I don't know about. And I just remember it being like, people, they were talking about like, this is one of your strongest pieces. And I was like, great, I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's just like, of course, the one that I was just kind of, you know, hemming and hawing about, but just acknowledging like what is not, again, and then what you know, like, has stayed with me since I was like I was 15. So it's just, you get it right the first time, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's, so SACE is a creative youth development program. We're a nonprofit after-school program. We're year-round and long-term. We're also tuition-free and centrally located in Southtown. You do. So we get funding from the community. We get funding from the nationally, and state and local. We're really well received in San Antonio, and we have a great like foundation support of people who are always like got our back for a variety of things. So it's great. It's a good question.
Okay, maybe we have one more question if there's any other questions. And Ashley, here, yes?
So you were interviewing people throughout the entire process. Were you, like, the only way that you were, like, keeping down their thoughts of their words was writing? Did you ever think of, like, recording them?
Yeah, I was thinking about recording them, but again, I was thinking about what I would want. I feel awkward about being recorded, and I think that I might want to do that just because of accuracy and the tone of their voice. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered like the locations of the voice, what was happening was very interesting. And so even the sound of like those car rides or the background of whatever was, you know, on Netflix in the background, I think that that would be really exciting for me. And I think that it would be good to just cover all my bases. So in the future, I'd probably want to do that. I just trying to figure this out. Mm-hmm. So like what would be the most honest way? Like pretend there's no equipment, right? So like that.
Well, if you haven't seen Ashley's paintings in person, they're just right outside the lecture hall, right on the end of the wall in this hall. And I want to thank you again for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Renee.
All you shared with us today.
I love
Really
this.
lovely.
This is super fun.